Welcome to This Explainer. Look, today we're jumping straight into one of the most sobering and, frankly, most consequential chapters in all of medical history. We're going to move fast here, unpacking a study that literally flipped how science treats human beings completely upside down.
Just wrap your head around this number. 40 years. From 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service ran an observational study that dragged on for 4 unimaginable decades. I mean, we're talking from the depths of the Great Depression all the way to the era of space travel.
Here's how it started. Researchers recruited nearly 400 impoverished African-American men in Macon County, Alabama, who already had latent syphilis. They lured them in with the promise of free medical exams, hot meals, and burial insurance. But here is the core deception. They tricked these guys into thinking they were getting actual treatment for something locals just called bad blood, which was kind of this catch-all term for various ailments back then.
Section 1. Chronology of a Tragedy, Decades of Deception. So, looking at the timeline, the study kicked off with about 600 men total, and get this, it was originally only supposed to last 6 to 9 months. But the absolute most shocking pivot happened between 1943 and 1947. Penicillin became the standard, widely available cure for syphilis, and yet it was deliberately withheld from these men.
Driven by this really dark mix of morbid scientific curiosity, systemic racism, and a push to observe the disease all the way to autopsy, researchers intentionally kept that cure away. They actually went out of their way to actively block these men from getting draft-related medical care during World War II, or even getting treated by local doctors.
Unbelievably, red flags were raised internally in the 1960s, but bureaucratic inertia just kept the whole thing rolling. It wasn't until a whistleblower, a guy named Peter Buxton, leaked the story to the Associated Press in 1972 that it finally stopped. The sheer public outrage, plastered across front pages nationwide, forced the study to shut down.
An immediate government review by an ad hoc advisory panel came back with a devastating yet totally undeniable verdict. The study was ethically unjustified. But, by the time those words hit paper, the irreversible damage to these men, their families, and their entire community was already done.
Section 2. The irreversible impact. Measuring the human cost.
And the human cost here was just staggering. Out of the 399 infected men enrolled, dozens died directly from the disease. But the suffering didn't stop there, it rippled outward. Because they were denied a simple cure, 40 wives contracted the infection and 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. By the time 1972 rolled around, there were only 74 survivors left.
So what happened next? Well, a massive class action lawsuit spearheaded by the NAACP and civil rights attorney Fred Gray led to a $10 million settlement in 1974. That legal action also forced the creation of the Tuskegee Health Benefit Program, ensuring medical care for survivors, a program that actually still serves their descendants today.
But the fallout wasn't just financial or immediate. There was this long-term, invisible damage too. A really pivotal 2017 study found that when the truth came out in '72, it triggered such immense medical mistrust that healthcare utilization in the area just plummeted. To put that into perspective, the result was a drop in black male life expectancy by up to 1.4 years. That is a massive societal impact.
And we're not just talking about dusty history here. Fast forward to 2024. And studies show that this exact same geographical area around Macon County saw measurable hesitancy during the COVID-19 pandemic. That historical trauma from Tuskegee directly translated into slower vaccination uptake almost 50 years later.
Section 3. Fiction versus facts. Correcting the record.
Because this story is so infamous, a lot of myths have popped up. So let's clear the air rapidly. First, you've probably heard the myth that researchers deliberately injected these men with syphilis. Actually, the documented reality is they observed men who already had latent syphilis. The core ethical failure wasn't infection, it was the deliberate denial of an existing cure to sick individuals.
Second, people often assume this was some top-secret underground conspiracy. No, the findings were actually openly published in major mainstream medical journals like the AMA as early as 1934 and 1936. The broader medical community absolutely knew what was going on. The only ones kept in the dark were the vulnerable participants being exploited.
Third myth, absolutely no one cared until the media found out in 1972. While the systemic failures were undeniably huge, internal alarms actually were raised earlier by folks like Peter Buxton. The real tragedy is that bureaucratic momentum and a deeply paternalistic medical culture just let those warnings be blatantly ignored.
Finally, there are claims floating around that this was proof of a deliberate bioweapon plot or genocidal intent, but the factual reality, it was driven by the systemic scientific racism of the era and profound ethical blindness. And honestly, overstating the facts as some sci-fi plot actually fuels unnecessary mistrust, because the factual reality of the deception and gross neglect is horrifying enough entirely on its own.
So, sticking to the facts, the deception, the total lack of consent, the medical neglect is really crucial here, because it's exactly this specific tragedy that became the direct catalyst for the strict medical protections every single one of us relies on today.
Section 4. Catalyst for Change, the Rebirth of Medical Ethics.
The absolute nationwide outrage over Tuskegee gave birth to the 1979 Belmont Report. This is a landmark document, guys. It essentially built the three unshakable pillars of modern bioethics: respect for persons, beneficence, which basically means maximizing benefits while minimizing harm, and justice, ensuring research subjects are selected fairly.
Think about it. If you've ever signed an informed consent form at a doctor's office or taken part in a trial, that is a direct result of the strict step-by-step institutional guidelines put in place after Tuskegee. Today, researchers absolutely must assess risks, secure independent institutional review board approval, and guarantee total, 100% transparency.
Now, healing takes a long time. Decades later, in 1997, President Bill Clinton issued a formal apology on behalf of the nation. That vital acknowledgement of the truth really helped pave the way for the National Center for Bioethics at Tuskegee University, which is an incredible institution dedicated to turning historical trauma into an ongoing triumph for medical ethics.
Ultimately, the biggest takeaway from all of this is recognizing an incredible legacy of resilience. Survivors, their families, and advocates demanded accountability and changed the system forever. Studying this history empowers all of us to ensure that science unconditionally prioritizes human dignity way above raw data.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really think about. How do we continue to build trust in medicine when history gives us legitimate, documented reasons to doubt? How can we use truth, education, and just unyielding transparency to heal these historical wounds and guarantee equitable, trustworthy healthcare for everyone? Keep asking those questions and keep learning.